So thank you all for coming. These talks are the third of the series of the town halls that we do here in Los Angeles. And these talks, which precede the Q&As that really define these events, these are really attempts to kind of communicate a general overview and occasionally some specifics about what the movement does, and of course, temporal things regarding events that we're doing and everything else. So what I have done with this presentation is an attempt to give yet another angle to what the Zeitgeist movement does, in the hope that it will resonate with some of you, inspire questions, and we'll take it from there. So I want to begin with a summation question. What is the Zeitgeist movement? What are its observations and goals? And what methods are being used to obtain those goals? Very simply, the Zeitgeist movement is a global community working in regional chapters seeking to create awareness to reform the entire socio-economic system in operation today across the planet. It's a big statement, isn't it? However, it's not just about that on another level. It seems like a singular structural kind of purpose, but it requires a number of other reforms that are built into it, such as basically the way people think, what they value, their moral ethics, how they view and interact with the world around them. So, as the word zeitgeist actually implies, a change in the culture itself must occur in tandem with the external structural changes proposed. People's dominant values are always derived from the system and hence the condition they're born into. And to change the system, of course, means to change what people think and believe. And that's a very radical statement to many people to hear, but I think as we'll go on, you'll see the importance of that. Let's move on to the next part of this question, which leads us to this necessity. How are these values arrived at? What is it that makes us think this way? There are two basic angles of observation within the Zeitgeist movement. First are the biosocial pressures, or contextually specific, the resolution-seeking problems we see in the world today, the pressures around us that we all know we have to find resolution for. Today we have over 1 billion people starving. We are quickly approaching energy, water, and food scarcity for the majority of the human species. We have periodic yet constant patterns of self-destructive behavioral tendencies, both to ourselves, other individuals, and ultimately other societies. And while we might be experiencing longer lifespans historically as a trend on average, the quality of life for most people, along with our life-supporting systems, is in fact in decline, with many physical and mental health disorders emerging and growing. On a different level, we have a planetary society that is systematically restricting itself from prosperity with fictional rules and contrived concepts, such as the existence of this thing called debt, which I'm sure we're all tired of hearing about. And for the first time in human history, a new paradigm is evolving where human employment in the labor force will continue to move inverse to industrial productivity, meaning fewer and fewer jobs are being created to meet essentially a growing population. These are just a few of the observations on that side, the problems. The other side exists in a vacuum, so to speak, outside the current system's process of causality, and more importantly, outside the pollution, if you will, of the conceit and traditional patterns largely held within the zeitgeist we have today. This side is about what is technically possible, or more accurately, what is scientifically possible. These observations have nothing to do with money, the free market, religious philosophies, politics, or any traditional notion many reference as empirical today, falsely. Rather, this is about what we have learned, what we can prove, what adaptations are technically possible, and then applying those understandings without the arbitrary interference of prior historical assumptions or practices. And with this perspective in the modern day, we see a massive clash of intent. For example, We know today that there is no technical reason for any human being to be without food or water on this planet. We have the capacity to continually feed the world many times over. Through this technical reality in general, we find that given the calculated life of the sun and the earth, we have an infinite amount of energy to utilize. Through localized strategic solar radiation capturing and geothermal mining, along with advanced battery and supercapacitor technology, while using a systems approach to energy efficiency on the largest scale we possibly can manifest. We can meet the needs of the human population many times over regarding energy for the next, 4 billion years. Through this scientific perspective, these observations that I'm talking about, we see that the degradation of our crop-producing arable land and water tables can be overcome through many forms of abundance-producing mediums that, in addition, can exceed the efficiency of those natural earth processes as they stand, such as ocean desalination and abundant organic indoor vertical farming. Just a few examples. We also notice that with a fraction of the scientific thought, high technology, and resources spent on the militaries of this world in its endless juvenile preparation for war, we could create incredible tools and solve problems at rates unmatched, where a sustainable, strategic material abundance could likely be created for the world's people that far exceeds what the majority have access to today. As a comedic interlude, I think the late, great Bill Hicks put the prior comment in the best manner.
Everyone got excited about the technology, and I guess it was pretty incredible watching a missile fly down an air vent. Pretty unbelievable. But couldn't we feasibly use that same technology to shoot food at hungry people? You know what I mean? Fly over Ethiopia. There's a guy that needs a banana.
With respect to human health, continuing on this other set of awarenesses, both mental and physical human health, if we simply took a technical perspective in viewing the cause of, say, the growing cancer rates and other issues and disorders, while reducing the neuroses producing stress and deprivation, which, by the way, Jason Lord will comment about here in a moment, we could adapt and align our society, becoming truly humane, operating solely to support the best physical and mental health we can have, not agitated and exploited in the worst possible way as we do today with the market system that actually profits off of our suffering. And finally, and possibly the most important, in the sense of time, where we are at this point in the evolution of civilization, if we simply were able to see outside the box that we've been born into with our competitive free enterprise anarchy, our debt and scarcity-driven market system, see outside the box of our primitive tribal sovereignty, echoes of gangs operating from the limited lower R complex of our brain's early evolution, to see outside the pointless political polarization and class warfare debates, we would then notice that the very nature of our system is actually destroying us, reducing our abilities, de-evolution, if you will, slowly but surely with its outdated, conflict-based, completely unscientific traditional approaches. The evolution of our civilization is making some things very, very clear. What we are doing isn't going to keep working. For example, global unemployment crisis that you see today around the world, which we are seeing pockets of mass destabilization here and there, all across the West, the East, everywhere. It's not going to stop. It can't stop because the system itself is enabling it through its interest to utilize scientific efficiency for the sake of market cost efficiency. We are simply too technically advanced to keep everyone employed from here on out, nor should we wish to, if we cared about actually meeting human needs. For employment is now inverse to productivity in most sectors studied. The result is that you can only see more higher unemployment numbers and invariably more civil unrest as this basis of the entire economic system is corrupted by the evolution of technology and its application. Now, this brings us to our goal. The goal of the Zeitgeist movement is to move into a system which will actually enable those technical observations just described, which will simultaneously systematically solve the major problems the world faces today at once. To put it a different way, the dominant social problems we see today are being generated by an outdated social approach. And those problems simply are not technically necessary anymore. This is the great realization and paradigm shift that's occurring with the species. The system we condone, which builds upon what is actually possible, truly sustainable and responsible, could be termed a resource-based economic model, for it is a ground-up management approach that puts the Earth's resources in scientific processes and natural laws first, with the human being and its needs, often contrived wants and values, secondary, only to be extrapolated from the actual reality of the world around us. We cannot impose our needs and wants on the environment that created us. We can only extract our values and sense of possibility from what we are taught through the scientific method, evolving in tandem with these natural laws as our understandings increase and emerge. There's really no other manner of operation. And the final point, how do we change? How do we create such a change in society? How do we overcome the evolutionary baggage that persists and is reinforced by the systems in place? Well, first, the change cannot be imposed by some authority anymore. Not only does totalitarianism not work and is socially offensive, violence in all its forms is and will always be a failed tactic for personal and social influence, possibly working for short periods of time, but always failing in the long run. Our approach to change must be a process of education, or more explicitly, what we call social therapy. We must work to inform others and change the group mind that comprises our social evolution. I leave that word with you, group mind. As many know, the human brain has not changed much in many, many thousands of years, yet our behaviors have changed dramatically. Just as we could, on average, create an environmental condition that would produce a person to be, say, a headhunter in the Amazon jungle, violently enraged, overthrowing his opposition as it comes to be, operating from primitive instincts that are illuminated by the surrounding culture, sacrificing life to other gods. We could just as easily create conditions where a person can become a peaceful, literate, PhD, humanitarian scientist working to solve problems and help others in an altruistic way. So we must not only change our personal minds, but we must change this group mind and its path of evolution. The Zeitgeist movement is, at the core, an awareness-changing organization working to redefine culture itself. We can only do this through mass projects to influence and spread information. We have many programs in operation for this purpose, as some mentioned earlier, from these town halls to radio shows that are occurring, to the Zeitgeist Media Festival, to Zeitgeist Day, a dominant event. And all these events, by the way, are occurring on a global scale. But, of course, spreading this information is only part. We can spread social information about change and possibility, but we also have to investigate and work on expanding such information in an active way. This, as it stands, will come from a think tank that's being proposed, that's being developed, in fact, called the Global Redesign Institute, a nonprofit that will be established fairly soon. And this will be a technical database and design platform to plot region by region, context by context, how we can technically reform the planet, updating it to the most advanced methods possible at whatever point in time for the betterment of human society as a whole, without monetary limitation, borders, or any other interfering social contrivance. Think about that for a moment. Everyone navigates their basis in the society about what they can afford. If you were to actually think about what we could do as opposed to what we can afford, it's a very, very different view of looking at reality and what's possible. So in time, these plans that will be created will be presented to the public for digestion in probably annual events, conferences. And the hope is that we can create a tipping point with this type of information, where sustainable practices will be implemented through mass demand. And of course, this is simply built into all the other awareness campaigns that we're working with as well, as previously mentioned. And this is, in a nutshell, what the Zeitgeist movement is about. We have these observations, we have our strategies, and we have our goals. And there's a whole lot more that can be said, but for the sake of time, I'm going to end this introduction, and I'd like to bring on Jason. Thank you for listening.